She thought she could control the neighborhood. But when Karen demanded all the whole mail at the post office, the postmaster snapped and called the cops. Watch how one woman's thirst for power went too far and backfired in the most unexpected way. Maplewood Heights was a quiet suburb, a place where everyone knew each other's name, and the lawns were always perfectly trimmed. In the heart of this peaceful town stood Karen, a woman whose presence had become as integral to the community as the white picket fences that lined the streets. A self-appointed guardian of the HOA, she had gradually risen to power with a mix of persuasion and intimidation. Neighbors might roll their eyes at her unsolicited advice, but they were too polite to confront her. Karen didn't just live in Maplewood Heights. She governed it. But Karen wasn't satisfied with just being in charge. She wanted control over every detail. Everything in the neighborhood, she believed, should be up to her standards. The HOA's mailbox, in her eyes, was the last piece of the puzzle. If she could take charge of the mail, she could ensure things were done her way, and nothing would slip through the cracks. One Saturday morning, Karen gathered her notes and a stack of HOA rulebooks and decided to take matters into her own hands. She'd overheard rumors of mismanagement at the local post office. Papers had been delayed, letters gone missing. In Karen's mind, this wasn't just negligence, it was an opportunity. She would take control of the whole mail. It was the final move in her grand design. With a steely resolve, Karen showed up at the post office, determined to collect every letter addressed to the HOA. They couldn't be trusted to handle it properly, she told herself. As she marched into the small, familiar building, she didn't notice the concerned glances of the people already inside. The employees at the counter had seen many strange requests, but Karen's didn't feel like just a request. It felt like a declaration. The moment Karen stepped up to the counter, Postmaster Daniels, a man who had worked in the small town for over 20 years, raised an eyebrow. He was used to the eccentricities of Maplewood Heights. But Karen had a different air about her, one that didn't sit well with him. "I need all HOA-related mail," Karen declared, placing a large, empty cardboard box on the counter. She spoke with the authority of someone who thought she was entitled to everything, as if her request was the natural order of things. Daniels gave her a polite but firm smile. "I'm afraid only authorized personnel can collect that mail, ma'am," he said, his tone professional. "I can direct you to the proper channels if you'd like." Karen didn't budge. "I am the HOA," she said, louder now, her voice sharp and unwavering. "I'm the one who handles all the matters of this neighborhood, and that mail is mine." There was a moment of silence. The other customers in the post office exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to react. Daniels, however, stood his ground. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but there was something about Karen that felt different. Her intensity was almost dangerous. "Ma'am, you can't just take mail that's not addressed to you. It's against the law," Daniels said, his tone growing more serious. He was prepared to explain things further, but before he could, Karen's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You're going to regret this," Karen spat, her face reddening with anger. "I'll have your job for this." The post office grew eerily quiet. The sound of Karen's shoes clicking sharply on the floor seemed to echo through the room as she crossed her arms. She had never been challenged before. People usually backed down when she spoke like this. Daniels, however, wasn't backing down. He didn't raise his voice, but his posture was firm. His hand subtly moved toward the alarm button beneath the counter. He wasn't going to allow this to escalate further. Karen's eyes followed his hand, narrowing as she realized the situation was slipping out of her control. She stepped forward again, determined to take what she believed was rightfully hers. "I'm taking this mail," Karen said with cold finality. Daniel's hand hovered over the alarm button, the tension thickening. He knew that this wasn't just about the mail anymore. It was about power, and Karen was dangerously close to crossing a line. Just as Karen made a move toward the counter, the door swung open with a sudden gust of cold air. Two uniformed officers and a postal inspector stepped in. The officers surveyed the room with practiced eyes. They had been called, and they were here to handle the situation. "Mom," one of the officers said, his voice calm but stern, "you can't take mail that isn't yours. That's considered tampering with federal property." Karen's mouth went dry. For the first time, she realized she had overstepped in a way she couldn't easily undo. But she wasn't going to let it show. "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm in charge of this neighborhood. You can't just come in here and tell me what to do." Her voice shook with a mixture of rage and desperation. The postal inspector stepped forward. "You don't have any right to take that mail. You're violating federal law. If you don't leave immediately, we will have no choice but to press charges." Karen felt a sharp pang of fear, but she pushed it down, trying to maintain the facade of control. Her chest tightened, her mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be in charge. This wasn't supposed to happen. The officers moved closer, their eyes steady on Karen, who was now visibly shaking. She glanced around the room, realizing the small crowd had gathered, some of them even filming the incident on their phones. The familiar faces of her neighbors, people who had once respected her, were now watching her every move. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had gone too far. "Mom," the officer said one last time, his voice softening but still resolute, "it's not worth it. Just leave the mail, and we can all walk away from this." By the time Karen left the post office, she was a pariah. The footage from the incident spread through Maplewood Heights, and soon, everyone knew what had happened. The whole board convened immediately to address the issue. Neighbors who had once seen Karen as a leader now saw her as a reckless, power-hungry individual. Her grip on the whole was slipping away. That night, Karen sat in the whole meeting, her hands clenched in her lap. She was no longer the confident woman who had once held sway over every decision. The board members looked at her with quiet disdain, and Karen realized, in that painful moment, that she had no one left out. In the end, the whole board voted to remove Karen from her self-imposed position of authority. It was swift and public. Maplewood Heights wasn't a place where power struggles lasted long. Karen, the woman who had once ruled with an iron fist, left the meeting in silence. As she walked through the streets of her neighborhood, she noticed the subtle shifts in the way people looked at her. No longer with respect or fear, but with pity. The weight of her own actions settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The queen had fallen, and the neighborhood had moved on. Karen's world had crumbled not from an outside force, but from her own obsession with control. The quiet hum of Maplewood Heights, once filled with her dominance, now seemed louder. She had wanted to shape the neighborhood in her image, but instead, she had shattered it along with her own reputation. In the end, power had slipped through her fingers like sand, and there was nothing she could do to stop it.